Hello, my name is Stefan Hojer-Williams and I'm reading Chapter 6 from Lexington Black by Lady Jaguar. The book is an MM Romance and has an adult theme. Enjoy. Deansfield House was too classy a place for Rob to bowl up to the front door in his crappy old Volvo, so he borrowed the R8 instead. Paul was pleased to let him, giving him the keys with a comment that he hoped the lucky woman would appreciate it. He had chosen to wear a suit, as Lex seemed to be one of those men who would be smartly turned out whatever the occasion. He gave his red Italian silk tie a good sniff to make sure it did not smell like frying meat. He could get away with it, he thought, if he put on some maternity aftershave as a cunning disguise. The phone rang as he was walking out the door. It was Jerry, checking to see if he was back in the land of the living. "I can't chat for long, I'm going to the Deansfield," he said. "With the Audi guy?" With the Audi guy. Immediately he could tell her radar was working overtime. "The one who terrifies you?" "Yeah, but so, is it a date?" "I don't know." He could feel his face growing pink. "It obviously is because you're blushing, and don't lie to me because I'm your twin and I know these things." Rob groaned inwardly. It was impossible to get away with hiding anything from his twin sister. "It's prawn cocktail and steak. Let's not overthink this." "Oh, I shouldn't be overthinking this. I wasn't the one who interrupted your fucking beauty sleep boo-hooing about your latest jerk-off fantasy, bro." "Okay, it's a date. I hope it's a date. If that means I'm waving the rainbow flag now, then fine. I'm cool with it." "Really? You're not going to agonize, feel Catholic guilt, go to confession?" "That isn't funny, Jerry." He ran his fingers through his hair. "I don't know, all right? I don't know. I'm apprehensive about how the evening will end, that's all. I mean, I'm a virgin, aren't I?" "How do you want it to end? And please, for the love of Mary, don't say you don't know. I mean, when did you actually last have sex, Rob? You must be gagging for it by... Oh, come on, Jerry, really? I don't put out on a first date. That's just slutty. But you're never going to see him again, are you? Live a little. Do you have condoms? Lube? Oh, safety first, bro." "I'm ending this call now," he said firmly. He glanced at his watch. His heartbeat elevated as he saw how close it was to 8 o'clock. "I have to go." "Good luck. If you need to call me later, you know where I am." "Thanks, sis." He blew her a kiss down the phone and hung up. His mood was strangely light as he ran down the stairs to his car. Something about talking to Jerry and her knowing what he was doing was reassuring. He did not know what would transpire in the next few hours, but she had his back whatever happened. Lex was alone in the hotel lounge when he walked in. He was sitting by the fire, reading the Times newspaper, holding a tumbler which Rob presumed held single malt. He was dressed in a sharply tailored jacket and tie, and Rob was glad he had decided to go with smart rather than his usual ultra-casual. Lex pressed the tumbler into his hand and urged him to try the Jameson. Rob hesitated. "I can't drink a lot. I'm driving." "Possibly," Lex said with an enigmatic smile. Obligingly, Rob took a sip of the whiskey. It was all smoke and fire. He nodded approvingly and handed the glass back to him. "And I've got a special treat for us," Lex said as they walked through into the dining room. They were led to a table in an alcove, an intimate space made for two. Other diners talked quietly at their tables. A pianist played Gershwin on a white Steinway at the other end of the room. "Here we are," Lex said as the waiter approached the table with a decanter of claret and a bottle. "I had this brought down from London this afternoon." He turned the bottle around so Rob could read the label. "Chateau Mouton Rothschild, 1982. Good heavens, I am honoured. How did you find this?" Lex looked pleased with himself. "It's called money, Rob. Money, persistence, and a very good PA." He smiled up at the waiter as he waited for him to pour a taster into his glass. "Let's hope it's worth the price." He cradled the glass in his hand, warming the liquid, then took a deep sniff, closing his eyes. Rob watched him, transfixed. Everything he did seemed to be suggestive of sex. He oozed it from every pore. Lex took a sip and thought for a moment. Superb. He motioned at the waiter to continue pouring. Rob empathized with the look of relief on the young man's face. He murmured in joy and left them alone. Your turn, Lex said. He watched intently as Rob picked up the glass, cradling it as Lex had done. He went to sip at it. Smell it first. Tell me what you get. Rob obeyed. He let his nostrils flare as he picked up notes of cedar, I'm guessing. I'm not very good. Well done. Now taste it. Rob took a mouthful. It was like honey coating his tongue. He wondered how it would taste if licked off Lex's broad chest, and his face flamed at the thought. That's obscenely good, he said, when he could speak again. I feel as if I've been groped by angels. Lex almost choked on his wine. He let out a burst of laughter that drew disapproving glances from other diners. I think we're going to have a very enjoyable evening, he said, and picked up his menu. I hope the food lives up to it. Rob expected another Spanish Inquisition about his life, and he got it. Lex had the skill of teasing information out of people. When I lost my job, our relationship went downhill. 6 months ago, I came home to find all my belongings on the doorstep, and the locks changed. I received our degree absolute 2 days ago. Rob toasted him flippantly with his wine glass. Lex raised his own glass in return. What did you do to piss her off? Apart from lose your job, that is. Rob spread out his hands and stared at them. It was on the tip of his tongue to say something about her not being the right sex. I was too placid. People used to say she was the one who wore the trousers. She accused me of being emotionally retarded, and I guess I was. If I may say so, you don't seem the placid type. What type am I? Lex considered his question for a moment, pinning him to his seat with those piercing blue eyes. You're the dark horse, he said. You keep people at arm's length in order to protect yourself. When did you realize you were gay? Rob's mouth dropped open. I didn't say I was. Lex said nothing but continued to watch him. He was very good at extracting information, Rob decided. He picked up his wine glass and hid behind it. So what do you do for a living? Are you a psychoanalyst? Lex smiled wryly, acknowledging Rob's desire to change the subject and respecting it. I'm the enemy, Rob. I'm into mergers and acquisitions. I buy companies, asset strip them, make a lot of money and move on. Like an Armani-clad locust. Does that bother you? Everything about you bothers me. It was out before he could stop it. I mean, wow, I'm sorry. Not sure where that came from. Maybe you need to step out of the closet. Rob laughed nervously. You don't pull any punches, do you? Neither do you. I don't waste time if something needs to be said. Well, am I right? Please, put me out of my misery. Rob sighed deeply. Until recently, I'd never thought about it. The whole marriage thing, I just fell into it. It was expected, you know. I have a huge family and they were all so excited when I met Sandy. I was the golden boy, the great white hope. Now I'm living above a kebab shop, but it's better than living in a huge house I can't afford with a woman who looks down on me. She never forgave me for not trying to get back into investing, but I never went into it for the money. It wasn't something I enjoyed doing. Lex regarded him closely. That's interesting, but it didn't answer my question, did it? What was the question again? I must have missed it. Lex rolled his eyes. Gay denial is so last year. I'm not in denial. Being gay is something I'm trying on for size, because it might look better on me than on the hanger, as it were. As he said it, Rob knew it was true. Lex picked up his wine glass. Well, if my opinion counts, I'd say you wear it very well. And no, your ass doesn't look big in it. Thank you. Rob said primly, unsure how else to respond. Lex looked speculatively at him. God, I love your accent. And you're cute as fuck, you know that. Rob looked down, blushing. I'm useless at taking compliments. No shit, Lex laughed. Try not to worry, Rob. Being gay isn't that bad. I never thought it was, but until yesterday I hadn't been inclined to give it any real thought. Rob stopped suddenly, realizing what he had said. He'd obviously drunk a little more wine than he intended. Hopefully Lex hadn't noticed. He hazarded a look at the man. Oh, he had noticed. He was grinning wolfishly. Until yesterday, huh? So, I wonder what happened yesterday to make that much of a difference. Rob huffed a sigh, his gaze sliding towards the piano player. I can't imagine. Lex's grin widened. I'm gonna park that for a while, but don't worry, I won't forget it. Are you happy working at the garage? The change of subject was a relief, but it was a tough one to answer. Rob loved working with Paul. It was easy and comfortable. Safe, but unexciting. He was 35 years old, too young to be mouldering away with a lot of old men in a provincial town in the middle of nowhere. I guess that answers my question, Lex said. Poole is great. Ratley's is a wonderful place, but I'm there 20 years too early, if you see what I mean. I do. Lex looked thoughtful. So, what are you going to do about it? I don't know, to be honest. It sounds like you need some motivation. I know. Motivation and confidence. Two qualities that haven't been in great supply for a long time. The waiter approached with 2 elegant plates of venison medallions, balanced artfully on a disc of mustard mash and pulled in fragrant gravy. As he put it on the table in front of them, Lex leaned forward, closed his eyes, and inhaled. God, that smells good! It looks divine. Rob picked up his knife and fork and began to eat. For a while they ate, uttering not much more than appreciative noises. The venison was tender and melted in the mouth. Maybe this is the time for you to start writing again, Lex said suddenly. I downloaded your book last night. It isn't my kind of thing, but you can definitely write. Rob lowered his knife and fork. Thank you. Apart from Jerry, you're the only one who thinks so. Maybe you should try a more accessible genre. The book did feel as if you were trying a bit too hard. Maybe write something you know intimately first. Just try to find your feet. Rob blanched against the criticism, especially as he knew it was true. I'm working on something else as well, based on my family. My father died when I was 12. He was the head of a local boarding school when he committed suicide. Shit, that's rough. There was a tremor in Lex's hand as he picked up his wineglass. I know, Rob said ruefully. Hideous, isn't it? My mother is a staunch Catholic and she was more ashamed than upset. She forbade us to speak of him from that day. All I have is the grandfather clock and some stuff I stole from his study before she had it emptied. She burned all his photos and books. It was as if she wanted to wipe him off the face of the planet. Do you know why he did it? No. He didn't leave any notes, so... Rob gestured helplessly. Lex dropped his fork with a clatter. Fuck, sorry, he muttered. He always seemed so melancholy, despite having a great career, wife and kids, a huge house. Don't get me wrong, he was a wonderful father, and that's why I had such a hard time with Mother destroying all those memories of him, even though I still hate him for what he did. The topic of conversation was turning too dark. Talking about it made him sad, and that made him drink more. Anyway, that's it. All very miserable and sordid. I guess the book is my way of exercising the past, but even if I knew the truth, I'd prefer to keep the story as fiction. That way I can inject the emotion whilst keeping the truth at arm's length. That sounds like a very good idea. Lex sounded as relieved as Rob felt to move on to other subjects. They finished their main course and, after not much persuading on behalf of the waiter, pursued the desserts. Rob learned that Lex had been at Princeton and had given up his business degree halfway through to live on a California beach and teach other wealthy kids how to windsurf. Dad had married this Florida chick and went to live in Miami, so I went and did my own thing. We didn't talk for years after until my stepmother died. Dad had his first stroke not long after that, and I was called back to Manhattan. There was a bitter twist to his mouth as he said it. Must have been quite a shock to the system. Yeah, but I knew how the corporate world worked. Dad made sure of that. He never forgave me for jacking it all in to be a beach bum as he saw it. Having a stroke was his form of revenge, I reckon. I'm not sure anyone who's had a stroke would agree with that. The flicker in Lex's eyes told Rob he had touched a nerve. Anyway, I came here to close a deal and succeeded. So that should please the old bastard. He toasted Rob with his wine glass and drank from it. What kind of a deal? We've just taken over one of your local transport companies. Not a very big one, but the assets were useful. It's not the Evis Group, is it? I know they've been fighting a hostile takeover in the last couple of years. Lex smiled evilly. I couldn't possibly tell you that. It must be. My father used to teach as CEO. I didn't know him as I went to another school. I only knew of him because he was head boy. What a strange coincidence. Isn't it? Lex said coolly. Rob sensed the subject was over. Would you ever go back to California if you had the choice? Lex shrugged. I never look back. What's the point? Do you have any regrets about your own life? Rob thought about it. Not really. Not even your marriage breakup? Like you, I'd rather move forward. I'm just not sure which direction to go, that's all. As the evening went on, gradually they were the only diners left. The conversation flowed as easily between them as the wine had done. Eventually, the waiter discreetly asked if they would like to take an aperitif in the lounge. Or we could go to my suite, Lex said casually. If you're unsure which direction to take, maybe I can help you with that. Rob jumped as he felt sly fingers stroking his thigh under the tablecloth. For the first time ever, he understood how some women felt at the end of a first date. That sense of obligation after the man had spent money on good food and superlative wine, the reluctance to go further, and the guilt that followed a refusal. Having relaxed him with alcohol and playful banter, Lex was moving in for the kill. He excused himself and went to the men's cloakroom. He splashed cold water on his face and held up a hand so he could see the tremor in his fingers. He wasn't ready for it, was he? Whatever it was. His dick was saying otherwise, though. It was only reacting to the aura of the man, though. Lexington Black oozed sex and power. Hell, anyone would be turned on by that. Wouldn't they? He had to escape, to go back home before he did something he would regret. He was in danger of acting in a totally irrational and hazardous manner. Lex smiled as he approached. What do you say to cognac? Thank you, but I really need to go, Rob said, trying not to sound too abrupt. Lex was on his feet in an instant. That's a shame. It would have been nice to explore your earlier revelation. You know, the one about rediscovering your gay soul. I feel some responsibility for that. Do you mind if I walk with you to your car? Rob mentally thanked his foresight in borrowing the Aldi. Sure. The night was dark and smelled of incoming rain. The car was parked under a tree, away from the comforting pool of light radiating from the hotel. One last-ditch attempt to get me to buy this car? Lex laughed when he saw it. I usually drive a Volvo, Rob admitted. It isn't quite as sexy. That's the only reason. Good, because I was never really interested in buying the car. Without warning, Lex moved in and pressed his lips to Rob's. It lasted barely seconds. Then Lex pulled back slightly, gauging Rob's reaction. Rob barely had time to think. He was aware of his hitched breath, his body frozen as if in fright. He must have given a subtle signal because Lex moved in again, his lips gentle at first, then applying increasing pressure. Rob opened his mouth to protest, but he was mesmerized by the unexpected softness of the lips on his, the faint abrasion of stubble against his chin, the rearing excitement in his boxers. He shifted his body, hoping Lex wouldn't feel it, and inhaled the aroma of coffee and spiced aftershave. Lex's tongue flickered against his own, seducing it into a slow-moving dance. At the same time, he pressed Rob up against the car, legs against legs, hips against hips, chest against chest. If he hadn't done so, Rob would have collapsed to the ground in a boneless mess. The kiss was long and languid, their tongues exploring every aspect of their mouths. As it went on, Rob could feel his whole being unfurling. Not just his cock, which was like an iron bar in his trousers, but everything. So many unformed questions about his life had been answered. The reason why he had never been able to commit to anyone. The reason his marriage disintegrated. The mistrust of the motives of other people. The constant feeling that some part of him was hidden or buried because he had not wanted to face the truth. "You've never done that before, have you?" Lex whispered huskily when he drew away. Rob shook his head. His voice had completely deserted him. "You weren't bad for a novice." Lex gently stroked Rob's chin with his thumb. His smile was tender, but his eyes were not. They were dark with lust. What was he supposed to say? Thanks very much? All he wanted was for Lex to kiss him again. And again. "I have to go," he said woodenly. He had to. He had to think and not do anything rash and stupid. Lex reached out and stroked Rob's face with the back of his hand. "If you change your mind, I'm in the King's suite." "Thank you. I'm sorry," Rob said again, and scrambled to open the car door. Halfway home he was mentally kicking himself. The words, "I'm in the King's suite," on a loop spinning round in his brain like a lariat preparing to capture him and pull him back. "Damn, damn, damn," he muttered. His cock was harder than ever, reminding him it had been a damn long time since he had last been laid. It seemed to be holding a one-sided conversation in his head. "Come on, Rob. You're single. He's single. What's the harm? He's flying back to the States tomorrow. You'll never see him again. Chalk this up to a new experience. If you don't like it, you'll know it isn't for you. Give me a break. I'm ready to detonate in here." He did a U-turn in the middle of the wide road and headed back towards Deansfield House.